Okay, thank you for everyone for coming this afternoon and taking time after school to join us for another session with Rabia. And we're looking forward to the learning and the sharing and all of the great pieces that Rabia can share with us to consider in unpacking case studies from schools in Ontario.
Thank you so much. So we're going to do our second session with case studies. We'll do unpacking case studies from Ontario schools using an equity lens, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the first session we talked a little bit more about case studies that sort of dealt with our own positionality and educator like positional power, and this time in part two we're going to be talking a little bit more about like the institutional and the structural case studies that come about and what we can do to make things a little bit more equitable for our multilingual language learners. So I just want to welcome you. We'll be using the chat as well as maybe breakout rooms as well as Jamboards as we go through. So I just want to welcome you all. If you feel comfortable, you can introduce yourself in the chat. I know most of you folks know each other, but you can do that as well. Oops. And so I'm just going to read the land acknowledgement to situate our work. So I'd like to acknowledge the land I'm learning and teaching from today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also want to acknowledge that as a settler, I'm on Treaty 13. Thank you for listening. And so here is our agenda. We'll just review our equity lens and theoretical understandings. We'll go into 3 case studies that we'll analyze, and then we'll also have some time to recommend some resources. So some of our learning goals today are considering equity in relation to our multilingual language learners, reflecting on the importance of thinking critically about systemic structures and policies and how they impact multilingual language learners, and then deconstructing case studies to really work towards more equitable outcomes for all of our students. So just want to remind you of, some of our guidelines and frameworks. Okay, we're going to get into our work. So just a reminder, we know that equity, we looked a lot into this in our last session, where we really talked about how, equity is really like about our own positionalities and reflecting on our different identities and positions and thinking about, where we have privilege and which identities give us advantage, which identities may disadvantage us because of oppressive structure. So, I just invite you to think about your own identities and how they inform the work that you do as an educator or in any capacity. And so just as a quick review on equity, we talked a lot last session about what equity actually means in relation to multilingual language learners. And we talked a lot about how, systemically multilingual language learners might not be getting what they need to succeed. And so, our different identities impact our experiences in the world, like on an individual as well as structural level. And schooling is a structure in our society, in our community, and different people of different identities experience historically as well as currently the school system in a different way. And so, our multilingual language learners are an equity seeking group. And we know that, different multilingual language learners will need different things to set them up to succeed. And it's, recognizing how the programs, the policies, our own actions or inactions can impact multilingual language learners' schooling experiences. And so when we think about equity, it's really thinking about, the student, their identity. It's thinking about the structure, which is the school, the ESL classroom, the ways in which we identify students. It's all of those things that are really the intricacies of the schooling experience. And we'll unpack this a little bit more. And so, today we're really going to be looking at the anti-oppressive framework, because we're going to be looking at the structures that really impact, multilingual language learners' lived experience in the school. And so, their identities, really impact their experiences in our schools. And so we're going to be thinking about like what are the policies that are at play in our schools or district level. What are the actions that we take that impact, you know, the choices that we make? How are kids identified? What type of programming do they have access to? And, you know, how are we placing students? Why are we placing students in maybe different identity groups or classifications? And what type of support are they receiving or maybe not receiving? And all of these, you know, questions are really part of like that anti-oppressive framework. We're really questioning the system itself, and we're questioning it so that we can like disrupt it in ways that will be creating more equitable outcomes for all of our students, but particularly our multilingual language learners. And so just want to kind of go through this. Last week, we really looked at case studies that helped us, you know, deconstruct our individual group actions, our mindset. And, you know, I think it's so important that when we're working towards equity, we think about our own identities, our positionalities. You know, why are we acting in certain ways? Why might we be taking these actions? Why are we not taking these actions? How do our biases also play a role in all of these choices that we may take or not take? And even though we have like the best of intentions, how do these things still, you know, come out and impact students' experiences? So a lot of our case studies, I think we went through 3, really dealt like on the individual and the group mindset. And so we really had an awesome time deconstructing those, where we looked at, you know, the deficit language, you know, recognizing that we're not neutrals. We looked at like prejudice, implicit, explicit bias, action, inaction, various forms of treatment. So, you know, we did a really great job looking at all of these on an individual level. And so today we're going to be thinking a little bit more around like the institutional and the structure and unpacking what this even means and looks like. So I'll invite you in the chat if you feel comfortable to just share like you know, what institutional and structural systems need to be rethought and change in relation to multilingual language learners that you think need to be changed. So maybe we'll just take a few minutes to put that in the chat. So what are some of those like structures or policies or frameworks or things that you think need to be changed to create more equity for multilingual language learners? You can also feel free to unmute if you feel comfortable, or you could just put it in the chat. Awesome. I'll open up the chat here. Thanks, Christine. Funding structures, absolutely. From the ministry, yeah, totally, to really center our students, right? Adam said assessment practices, right? Like family communication procedures. That's amazing. Thank you. The policy and the step documents and assessment might need updating. It's very interesting. Right. Sula said like consistency, right? That's true. Absolutely. Tala. Yeah, I see a lot of our like you know, our thoughts are really aligned where there needs to be more like assessment funding and just supporting staff, right? Yeah, we're gonna look into that in one of our case studies. Right, Maria, changing ministry documents will influence how boards manage and fund programs. Absolutely. It really trickles down, right? And if they make those decisions, it shows what matters as well, and like where we need support and what matters. And Janet said single language tech sets. Like having the resources as well to do our work in an authentic way, right? Wow, Christine, that's a really great point of reflection. Could the staffing structures for ELL supports reflect the staffing structures for special education needs? Uh, and you continue to say teacher training and principal training courses must include, absolutely, yeah, not just as like an like little sprinkle add-on, but like embedded throughout, right? Understanding between departments, yeah, absolutely, so that there is that consistency and cross-curricular approach. This is amazing, everyone. Are there any other comments before we move on? Thank you so much for deconstructing that really thoroughly and really coming from folks who are in, on the ground, like doing the work, knowing what needs to happen and what changes need to take place. Thanks so much, everyone. Please feel free to continue sharing as we continue. So, you folks have really showed us and like demonstrated like what changes need to happen and why these changes need to be like a structural change, because we know when things are structurally changed, when policies and curriculums are changed, we know that what comes with that is like funding and more opportunities for us to actually do our work more equitably and more authentically. And so if the change doesn't come structurally, it's a lot of it is on our shoulders to then try to do all of these things by ourselves. We know that if there's institutional and structural change that's consistent throughout, we know there's a lot more that can happen, and there's a lot more like respect given as well towards the topic and the folks, whether it's the educators and even the students and our children who are part of these identity groups. And that's really what we want. We want all kids to be set up to succeed. And I think if we want all kids to be set up to succeed, we also have to set like the educators up to succeed, because they're like the frontline folks who are impacting our students and our children. So thank you for saying that. I just want to add some of the stuff that you folks have already said, like the policies, the procedures, the structures, the rules, the institutional practices, as well as the norms. Like, what are those things that just become like normalized, but when they become normalized, they also kind of become like those institutional things that are happening all the time in schools, whether it's specific kids with specific identities always being like put in specific classrooms. Like, how do those things that are seen as like the norm kind of become institutionalized, whether it's at the school level or even like a school board level? And so our case studies are going to be looking at the institutional and structural level that you folks have really demonstrated. And we always want to remember that when we're working towards equity, we really need individual as well as like structural and collective change. So the individual change still matters, but the collective as well as the institutional change is really needed to like mobilize and move us forward, because when we have those changes in place, we can then move forward and do what we need to do. And all of these things that you have stated, all of these institutional things that we want to change impact students on a daily in their daily schooling life. Like all of these things, the policies, the procedures, how we might communicate, all of these things have like a direct impact on students' lived experiences in the school. And so it's important that we think critically about like what's happening and what needs to be changed. And I recently came across this quote and I absolutely love it because I think it really speaks to the structure that we're talking about. And so the quote says, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I thought, I think this is so powerful. And I'd like to just maybe take a minute or two to just reply. Like, how do you think this quote speaks to or connects to the need for institutional or structural change in relation to multilingual language learners? How does it connect the structural for you, maybe? Maybe while folks are typing or thinking, I can share my understanding of it. And so, when I read this quote, I really thought about like how we need to go to the root cause, which is the structure and how it impacts different people and their experiences. And so a lot of the times we're kind of doing like those band-aid solutions to kind of like create change. And a lot of it is like on our shoulders as like individual educators or maybe like groups of educators. And I think as educators, like we always do this. It's in our heart to always try to do the best that we can. But with that, we also need support from the ministry or our school boards to help us structurally create equity. Like it's hard for us to just be kind of putting band-aids or pulling kids out or trying our best to support each of our individual students. But it's important that we look at the structure, because if we look and fix the structure, then we can ensure that kids don't like fall in, or that they don't lose out, or that they're set up to succeed from the point they enter into schooling, right? So that was some of my thoughts around like how it really connects to the structure. I'll just read some of things that people have said. Yeah, thank you, Atala, for saying that. We really need to, as a structure, we are really good at like putting the band-aids, but we don't always go to the root. Yeah, I think that's so true with so many issues. We are really good at like just doing those like solutions that are not necessarily sustainable, and it's important that if we want equity to be sustainable for multilingual language learners, to really set them up to succeed, and that takes the systemic, right? And Christine, mindset, right? We're all educators of ELLs. That's so true. It needs to be a whole school holistic approach and thought. Adam, this is a really good quote. Absolutely. Thanks so much for saying that, Adam. We really need policy and options for multilingual language learners that allow them to also choose the pathway that honor their gifts. Yeah, we need different paths, and we need to make it into the policy and into the system where our students have the option and the opportunity to see what's out there for them. It can't just be like one specific straight path for multilingual language learners, but there needs to be options, and these options need to be like articulated to our students as well. Thank you for saying that. Christine, improve and update our tools and resources so teachers can get upriver efficiently to help. Right. Yeah. Providing educators with the tools and the resources to set them up to succeed. And so that's why I think that there's a relationship between like equipping educators and helping them like succeed, because that has a direct impact on like students and how educators can help their students. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your ideas. I just wanted to, oh, sorry, Atala. Yeah, absolutely. It has to be a priority and not just like an option. It needs to be articulated from the structure itself. Oh, anytime. Thank you for attending. I just wanted to bring your attention to this. It's actually an article which will include in the resources as well. I'm sorry, I don't think I included this in the resources, but it's just sort of showing us like what systemic change actually like takes, and it just talks a little bit about the different aspects of structural change. I feel like sometimes it's hard to know like what structural change means and looks like. And so this little image sort of helps us deconstruct that. And this is actually part of a video. So it's a really good video on just, you know, what equitable systemic change looks like. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. And we're just gonna go into our case studies now as well. I'm just looking at the time. We talked a little bit last time how case studies are really important because they can mobilize and help us transform and work towards change. Case studies really provide us with like voices of people who might be experiencing different things. And I think it's an honor to be able to hear these voices and provide space for them to like speak and to tell us what's happening in a safe way. And I think for us to really honor those voices that are coming forward and sharing their experiences, we have to act on it. We can't just like, you know, have these voices share, and sometimes sharing can be like traumatic. So it's really important that we like act upon what these voices are saying and what they're asking for that they need. And I think that's where like our positional power comes into play as educators. Like, how can we create that change in whatever, you know, sphere of influence we have? So this was just a resource that's really good to read in relation to like the power of case studies, and it's by Paul Gorski. So if you're interested in like, you know, learning more about case studies and the case study methodology and bringing it forward to your team, this would be a great text to explore. And as we just go into our case studies, it's just important to always like situate our work in our context. So, you know, some aspects of these case studies might be like universal, where we can see aspects and reflections in our own students and in our own context. But I think when we're designing case studies or when we're like unpacking case studies, it's the context piece is important because each of our context is, you know, individual. And the needs are different, like the equity needs are different in each space. So it's really important that we're centering the voices that are in our community and in our like specific context to learn and grow and to like mobilize that transformative change. And so we're going to go through case study number 1. And this one, we're just gonna practice together as a whole group and we'll model it. And then the next 2, we might have breakout rooms. Christine, do you think it's good to do the breakout rooms or do it all together?
We have a small group, so we could do it together or we could do breakout rooms, whatever the group really wants. If you have a preference, just put it in the chat.
Okay, so maybe let's do this one together and then one in maybe a breakout room and then one together as well. Maybe that's okay with folks?
I think that sounds great.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So this is the first case study, so I'll just read it out loud. It's February, and on Monday, you will be getting a new English language learner student in your grade 4 classroom. In your school, there are only some ELL students, and so there is no designated ESL support. You know that in their home country, the student has received schooling up to grade 2 because of instability in the country. What are some ways you can prepare your classroom to support this new ELL student? Where can you seek out support? How can you build or rebuild your classroom community to support the student? So we'll unpack it together. And this was the case studies framework that like we introduced last time. So when we're looking at our case studies, we can sort of think of them through like these three different ways. There's lots of different other ways as well. But this can maybe help us like start to deconstruct it. So the first aspect is, you know, thinking about like what is the issue or issues in this case study. And that's like the think stage. Then it's really like the feel stage, like who is impacted and how are they impacted? And, you know, there's more than like one group of people or even like a person who might be impacted. And then it's the acting stage, because I think it's really important that when we have case studies, we think about the actions that we're going to take to create a change. And so what are like 1 to 3 next steps to ensure equity and an anti-oppressive stance? And I think with acting, it's important to break it up into like short-term goals and long-term goals so that we can really work towards sustainability, and we can work towards ensuring that there is change and those voices are listened to. And so when I was sort of thinking about this, and please feel free to add your ideas and comments in the chat or even unmute, but I highlighted some of the initial like issues that I think are in this case study. So I think one of the issue is that like there's no designated ESL support. Another issue or like aspect is that the student has received schooling up to grade 2 because of instability in the country. Another issue is like how you will prepare your classroom and where you can seek out support. So I've highlighted the different like issues or aspects we need to like unpack to really create change. Are there any other issues that folks see that should be highlighted? Okay, we'll just move on if it's okay. Oh, I see a comment. Oh, right. Thanks, Atala. Like, what language does the student speak? That's really important, because it'll inform like how or where you can get that support. Thank you for really pointing that out. Anything else? Oh, sorry, Atala, are you wondering what language does the student speak?
Yeah, like I don't see it, but it's something that it will help us definitely with the issues and the action plan, because I more often than not, sometimes they usually, especially when you say where can you seek out support, sometimes people just call for support, but they don't have enough information even to share, and you don't even know how to support. So I think knowing what language they speak, it's a key component for supporting language learners.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because that can really directly inform your action plan, like you're saying.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. So these would be some of like the issues or things that we would want to like unpack. So let's so these were just some of the things that I thought of, but please feel free to like add in more in the chat or even unmute. So, you know, we've sort of talked about so we sort of like talked about some of the issues, and I think I just wanted to add in these 2 other comments, and also Atala's point of like finding out information, like background information about the student to inform your action plan would be something that we would definitely want to put on here. But we also want to, we also want to address how the educator might be feeling overwhelmed and maybe isolated. Because, you know, it's in the middle of the year, they might not know like how to get that support, I guess, like the initial step. And, you know, they just might be feeling like not knowing necessarily where to start, or they might know. So just, you know, honoring the educator's voice as well. So these would be some of the issues. And feel, so we want to see like who is impacted. Oh, sorry, Adam. Oh, thanks, Adam, for that really great point. In an Ontario context, there might be like a French teacher who could help us with some of those strategies. So that could really support educators not feeling so isolated and alone. Maybe they would have someone to go to and ask for help. Thanks for saying that. So these are just some of the things, initial things that I put down of like who might be impacted. So, you know, please feel free to like add on to this. So we know the student might be impacted as well, like who's coming to a new environment. Are there going to be supports in place to help the student succeed? The educator as well. You know, how are they going to take those initial steps to support themselves as well as the student? Other teachers in the school might be impacted as well. You know, sometimes things might need to change and there might be like a whole school approach that might be mobilized. So will assignments or just things might change if there is like, you know, some students that are coming in who might need more support. And how is, you know, like the wider school community is also impacted, because the question is like, how is the wider school community also going to support this new student as well as the educator? Anything else that folks might want to add? Oh, thank you so much for saying that, like the ESL teacher and French teacher to like collaborate and work together. Yeah. Just the teamwork will really help us like not feel so isolated, especially if maybe there isn't any other support for other reasons. So what are some of the solutions? These are just some solutions, but I know that you folks will have more. But some of the short-term solutions can be, you know, like letting the classroom students know that there's a new member coming, thinking about like how to build a welcoming and safe space, connecting with the administrator to voice your feelings, ideas, next steps, or get, you know, direction, or to get even more information, like what you've said, to, you know, build a plan, you need to kind of have the information. Preparing some like initial assessments for students. So maybe that's in relationship with the other educators in the space, like the French educator, maybe if there's some support for that, or if the administrator or other people in the building can help direct you to build those initial assessments or just initial work for the student. And another, you know, aspect in a short term is to really hold high expectations for the students, and to really consider in a way, like in a critical way, like if you might have any biases that might impact. I think all of those are really good short-term things that are going to help you as the educator set yourself up to succeed as well as the student. And some of the long-term goals might be, yes, Adam, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Rabia. I just wanted to add in the short term, and you're talking about holding high expectations. And I think one of the things we're starting to hear about is honoring and creating space for that home language in the classroom as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And how that looks will be different for each student probably when they arrive, but perhaps, I don't know if you have had experience with success with that, if you could comment on that as well. Sorry to interrupt though.
No, thank you so much for saying that. I absolutely think that's so important, you know, honoring and respecting the home language and creating space for it, and just in different ways creating space for it. And I think, you know, making it like normalized to have that in the space. And I think that will also be part of like the conversation that you might have with your classroom community when you're like building and rebuilding your classroom community, of just honoring the languages that students will bring, you know, and making it normalized. I think that will really help the student who might be new feel like affirmed and honored, but also it will help the other students build that safe space. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please feel free to, you know, share any of your thoughts. And, you know, some of the long-term goals will also be to, you know, individually and structurally set up the student to succeed. And if, you know, if it feels like the weight is really on you, you know, how can the administrator also consider like a whole school approach, like a systemic approach, if there's like many students that you might be getting? And how can like different educators in the building support like the student or support you as the educator, like the resource teachers, the teacher librarians, like what role will they have in a whole school setting to support you in a long-term way? And, you know, connecting to school board supports like translators, support workers, those types of things as well. And please feel free to add any other comments. Atala, yep, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment, like even on the long-term goals, something that we're doing in my board is really trying to implement CRRP across the board. So when those practices, you know, the high expectations, the cultural competence, the, you know, critical consciousness across the board to see all the students, I think, you know, yeah, these things are individual to the needs of each school or a classroom or whatnot. But when the base and the foundation is that anti-oppressive stance to really include everybody, I don't think it's you know, it should be that daunting. And I know it's probably the ideal that we are all aiming to do, but I think you know, just having those conversations about, you know, really getting to know those students, kind of going back to what Adam was talking about, the prior lived experiences, that students do not come as blank slates, like, you know, the asset baselines. Like, I think when that is a foundation for the board, like, and one of the things is like strategic plans for all school boards across the province have this beautiful language about inclusive sense of belonging, creating a culture of learning, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm grabbing into all these things that are in existence to see if we can really make a difference in the, you know, in the ground. So
yeah, thank you for saying that as well. Like putting the fancy language to work, right? And making it tangible. So that's really powerful. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay. So we'll just, if there's any other responses, please feel free to unmute or even share. And so I'm just looking at the time, Christine, do you think it might be better to share whole group or do a breakout room quick and then come back?
I'm gonna do for this first one, do you want to just go to a breakout room for a few minutes?
Maybe like 5 minutes? Is that good? Okay. So this will be the case study that you'll be analyzing. I'll read it to you, but you'll also get a Jamboard link that you can unpack. So while Christine, I think, might be putting in the Jamboard link, I'll just read it to you quickly. And so when you're in your breakout room, you want to maybe like don't feel so pressured to like write on the Jamboard. Just have a conversation around the framework, like what is the issues, who's impacted, what are some actions that you can take. So I'll just read this out. This year, you're teaching the junior ESL program at your school. You check the list of ELL students you'll be supporting and see Philip and Ruth's name listed. After conducting an initial assessment, which includes having a conference with the students individually, as well as reaching out to their parents to complete a comprehensive student profile, you find out that in their home country, schooling was all done in English. You're confused and question why these students were placed in an ESL program and try to get information from different stakeholders in your school community. All you're told is that all students arriving from this country are put in the ESL program for at least 1 to 2 years. And so in your breakout room for about 5 minutes, you'll just think about like the framework, like who's impacted, how are they impacted, and what are some things that we can do to really work on the institutional and structural level to create more equity. Is that okay?
So I'll open the breakout rooms for everyone.
Perfect.
We'll go for 5 minutes to about 4:20. Oh, good. So there's 2 people in each room.
That's perfect.
There it is now. Yeah.
Do
It's
you
very
think they have access to the Jamboard? Should we put it again? Sometimes it like.
I know I put it in. I don't know if it was set as a viewer. Is that what you wanted?
Oh no. No, I can change it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I think it's just the wrong link.
Oh,
Just a sec, because in the other page it says something different. So my link is different than yours, Christine.
like
Sorry, I
case
don't
study
know.
1.
This is case study 1, yeah.
I'll just try to change.
Because the one says, Christine, the one that you're posting says viewer, and the one that I'm posting says sharing at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was.
And I don't know if we can see who is in here still. Just a second, I can't see. But when I clicked on the link to get into my room, it closed out the whole system. So I had to re-log in.
Oh, weird.
Oh no.
I can see 2 people in each room still. And I can see lots of people on the link. So I'm assuming you just changed the link, Rabia, like to the sharing settings to viewer or to edit.
Yeah, I changed it to editor, but let me try again.
That's okay. I think then it's fine.
It says anyone on the internet with this link can edit. Is
Okay.
that okay?
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Should work.
I think people in such a short time, they won't, like they may not write on it anyway. So,
Yeah, as long as they just talk about it, it's okay.
okay, that's good.
Maybe I'll try.
Yeah, it looks like I can edit it, even though the link says
Yeah.
it's short. I don't know why.
And I can add a sticky note now as well. So
Perfect. Thank you.
No, it's good.
Hi, everyone. I know that was a super short time, but thank you so much for, thinking and learning. Is there anyone who would like to share some of like their group's conversation around this case study? Was it like something familiar, different? Any ideas?
I'll hop on. Hi there. We were speaking about this and I was sharing that this scenario I'm going to a school to deal with tomorrow.
Wow.
So really, really relevant. And we were just talking about it in our small group, just about trying to bring in as many people as possible, whether it's guidance and admin. Where I work, we have multicultural liaison officers, MLOs. I'm not sure if that's in other boards, but just trying to bring in as many people as possible to have this conversation and be part of the conversation as to we want students being placed at a level to have them moving as quickly as possible towards their goals. And coming from a high school background, students might, if their instruction if their instruction has been in English, and then there would be no reason for them to be in an ESL program. And so kind of just giving the benefit of the doubt that nothing malicious has been done, but this is a systemic thing that which could be argued as malicious for sure. But just the idea that trying to educate everyone involved as to what the best process would be and the best placement. Sorry, I got this one here.
No, it's all good. Thank you for sharing. I think you bring out some really important like points, which is that this is like a systemic thing and it's impacting the lived experience of that student in their schooling experience. And some of the actions are to like educate and then like to have that whole school or whole department like equity or like CRP approach. And that's so important. And another thing that you really say is like bringing different like voices at the table to like help like educate and move forward so that like it's not happening again at a school. So thank you for sharing lots of different things. Are there any other things that folks might want to share? Adam, yep, go ahead.
Atala and I had a really good conversation, so thank you for the opportunity. And one of the things I think Atala brought up, and I agreed with wholeheartedly, is that idea of policy big P. So there's the issue of dealing with these two students and making sure that this school kind of shifts its mindset and that everyone gets on the same page about, as Chris said, what's best for these students. But then I think the next step beyond that is to make sure, like, and perhaps as many of us on the call are centrally assigned, kind of bringing back to the people that can have an effect on policy. This sounds like it's all students from this country are put in the ESL program. Sounds like a bigger than one person at one school making this decision. Probably has to be revisited in a larger context as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Adam. That is so important. It needs, like, the conversation needs to be expanded, right? And the scope needs to be expanded, and we need to see like who is making these decisions and like why it's happening. Maybe there's like some professional development or some conversations that need to take place to like streamline in a way like what's happening, that each student is like taken as an individual and not just like lumped together. Like I guess that like CRP approach needs to be like streamlined or like centered. Maybe streamlined is not the right word, but maybe like centered, so that each student that we have, we're being like relevant and responsive and not just like checking off a checklist like, okay, this student needs to go here type of thing. That's what I'm hearing. Thanks for sharing that. Excellent. Any other ideas? Oh, I see something in the chat. Janet said, I would wonder if there is a difference in dialect. Oh, like English dialect, maybe is that like why maybe folks are putting like students into that?
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
I guess, yeah.
We had from like, we often have our Jamaican students placed into ESL classrooms, and they speak, many of them speak English, right? Or a dialect of it, but they still seem to find our ESL program a valuable experience because of the difference in dialect.
I think that's interesting, but I would think that like those students can also like comprehend and understand in like the mainstream classroom. So I guess it depends on each student individually, but I would say that like if the student is able to like understand and comprehend their context, their learning, then maybe they don't need to be placed there. But I would say that each like student, we would need to be like responsive like to the needs of that one student. But I would just be, I guess, like careful or just interested in knowing that like the student can comprehend and understand like the language. And then if it's just a dialect, then it's just an individuality. Does that make sense?
Yep, I agree.
Thank you for saying that, Janet. That's a really great topic, and discussion, and it's really like an important topic for us to explore because it's so much part of our experience. Santos.
Hi there.
Hello.
I'm Anna. Sorry, my name is so
Oh,
long.
sorry.
You can't even see my first name on.
So sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation. So, as much as the placement is important as well. One thing, the conversation we're having at my board is around, also that it's this doesn't need to be a placement. It needs to be revisited. So, our ESL students sometimes at the beginning of the year are picked up by the ESL teacher for support. But, there seems to be this idea that it's, now the schedule will be the same and the support is going to continue to be the same until the June. And that's not always the case, right? So the placement is important, but, we have been having to work a lot on that mindset about, that the ESL teacher may recommend that the student's ready to be integrated into the classroom at any point in the school year. And that's okay. I find sometimes we get really stuck on, the year, but some English language learners, like we know, go through the step continua quicker than others and would benefit being integrated back into the regular classroom sooner than others. So that's a conversation we're having. It's a difficult one. But so placement, as well as just understanding that we're constantly assessing and we're constantly revisiting the support provided for students.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's so beautifully said. And I think, you're really highlighting the equity part where, different students need different things to succeed. And it's not going to be like consistent. Like, I think if we're being relevant and responsive educators, and we know that our students are going to move along in different ways. And I think it's important to like honor that, like some students might need more support, some might need less. And yeah, like I think there needs to be the flexibility around honoring, where the student is and how they're moving along. But you're right, like the policies and the placement and the structure make it really hard to be flexible. So I think it's really great that you're having like those mindset shift conversations. Thanks, Sula, for mentioning the flexibility piece. Right. The assessment piece needs to be ongoing. Yeah, it can't just be like something we do sometimes, but to really be responsive, there needs to be that ongoing assessment. Absolutely. Assessment will impact how we plan as well, right? Maria says, that's an interesting point, like just the interruptions, like so many interruptions, right? Like that's so true. I think that is like a structural issue sometimes as well.
Can I just say something? I know we're really on the time, but I just kind of wanted to go along about what some people said, that it's totally on a case-by-case basis, like we need to keep revisiting. The only thing that I kind of want to stress is that, unfortunately, when it comes to language learners, because there is this assumption and this, I don't know, stigma attached to it that, that all students will need to learn English before they do A, B, and C. And our parents don't necessarily will be huge advocates to come and, rattle the system or question our decisions or come and yell at the principal. A lot of our students fall into these totally fall off the radar, and then they really go along with whatever the recommendations are from the system. And again, in comparison, I'm probably gonna, just not necessarily comparing apples to apples, but when it comes, for example, to a special education, placing and meetings and advocacy and parents are involved and things like that. These are processes that are very well established because there is so much legalities and accountability attached to it. And then there is a huge policy attached to special education, and so much is at stake. And I know the needs are totally different, but what I'm getting at is that the importance that those processes are followed in comparison to language learners. So, I think until we make certain things mandated and with a big accountability piece, and I call it the big policy when it's mandated, I think we're going to still kind of fall short in how we support language learners through that equity lens, because
there needs to be like more support in the policy.
Yeah.
And just because that will help us then carry out like equity, I guess, in a way, right? It'll help us advocate for students and what they need.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sula, so much for attending. And we're just getting near the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for this conversation. We had like just some, I think we've added really, you know, everything everyone said, all of these really important key pieces. Yeah, you know, individual bases, checking our own bias or the bias of the space, connecting families, different ways to assess. Assessment is ongoing. Thank you so much for saying that, everyone. We had one more case study, but maybe that's something that you can explore on your own, or should we go through it quickly?
I mean, the group could then vote, but yeah, I think maybe people want to explore it on their own or consider meeting at another time.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think the two that we did really helped us like unpack things. And so I think what we'll just do is just go on to the next one. Sorry, I just wanted to just wrap up. You know, I think case studies are really important because they can help us engage in dialogue. And I think dialogue can help us move towards transformative change. So I think that's where it's really important. So I would encourage you to, you know, continue exploring and centering voices that, you know, that we need to hear in terms of like moving towards equity. And really, I just want to end with this quote, like all students deserve equal access to high quality education. And we know that sometimes MLL students or ELL students are not structurally set up to succeed. And I think that's really where our role as like, you know, educators with positional power, we can try to, you know, create these changes for our students. And so just some of these resources. And thank you so much for all of your really amazing contributions. And it was such an honor to talk and be in dialogue with you.
And thanks, Rabia. We want to say a big thank you from us to you for bringing your equity lens and for helping us pick apart these case studies. You help expand our understanding and knowledge of equitable tools and give us something better and bigger to bring into our learning spaces. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you to everyone that was able to join us this afternoon.